Welcome to the flight for today. Today we're going to be flying from Calgary in Alberta to Vancouver in British Columbia. Welcome aboard. So the first thing we've done is created a flight plan from Calgary to Vancouver, and you can see it here on the screen. So taking off from Calgary on the right hand side, we're going to fly west into Vancouver on the coast of British Columbia. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the operational flight plan, and you can do that by looking at the SimBrief flight plan by clicking on this button on the left hand side within Navigraph charts. So this is our flight plan for today. So we're going from Calgary to Vancouver. We've got planned fuel where it looks like the altitude they've planned for us is 36,000 feet, so flight level 360. The trip is about an hour and 12 minutes, and we've got the normal contingency fuel, alternate fuel, the reserves fuel, which gives us a reserve number that we'll need to put into the flight plan, into the flight management computer when we get to it. So we need 4.8. I'm probably going to put 5,000 pounds of reserve fuel in. You can see here that our flight plan is from Calgary. We're going to take off from 17 left, direct to bow tag, and then through the airway Q894 to booth, and then the standard arrival into Vancouver, 8 left, Canuck 5 arrival procedure. So that's the flight plan that we have, and let's get going. So first of all, we need to start with our startup procedures. So we have the battery on already and the ground power is connected. We have electric hydraulic pumps are on. We are looking at the landing gear lights. We have 3 green here, and ordinarily you would have an aft overhead that would indicate 3 green as well, but we don't have an aft overhead, so that's fine. We checked our aircraft documentation. We're good, and we're good on checking any master cautions. So first of all, we now need to check the engine fire instrument. So we'll do the fire test, the fault test, the fire test, all good. We'll check the squibs. The squibs are 3 green, so that's all good. So we have no smoking sign is on, and we're going to put the emergency exit lights on, and we'll test the attend button. Flaps are indicated as up and are up. Circuit breakers are in. The rudder and aileron trim is all good. We're going to do a cargo fire test. That's all good. Circuit breakers are all in. We've done the stall warning test, the Mach airspeed test, the flight recorder is tested, the IRSs are onto nav because we have our instruments that are located based on the GPS. We've done our oxygen test. We're going to do a bit of a light test here. We're going to check all the lights are working in the overhead, which they are. In the pedestal, we're good. All the lights on the MIP are good. And we'll do a config check. So we get the config warning. So that's all good. So now we're going to check the weather. So we're going to shut down the operational flight plan, and we're going to check the weather in Calgary. So we go to the weather tab in Navigraph, and in Calgary our current weather is wind 190 at 9 knots. We have visibility 40 statute miles, overcast at 6,000 feet. The ceiling is 6,000 feet. Temperature's 0, dew point is -10. And our altimeter is 2980. So we're going to switch over to the flight display and show us adjusting the altimeter to have the appropriate altimeter setting for our altitude for takeoff. So switching over, now you can see our PFD in the middle, shows our attitude. You can see at the moment our altimeter is set to 2983, and it's actually 2980, so we're going to adjust that down using the EFIS on the main instrument panel into 2980. Okay, 3560, that's the elevation of the airport, so we're good. So now what we're going to do is load the flight plan into the flight management computer. So on the right hand side you see the flight management computer, and Zibo has just added a additional ability to be able to load the flight plan directly from an export out of SimBrief into the FMC. So what we need to do is we've saved it on our computer. We're just going to request that flight plan now, and that will give us the ability to load all of the information in that flight plan into the FMC. It just makes setting up the flight a lot easier. So it's now giving us the message it's ready to load. So we click on load, and it loads it. You see on the screen we're starting at runway 17 left, and we're going to CYVR and so on. So now we're going to activate that and execute, and we're now can move on to the performance initialization page. So this is also able to be loaded in from the flight plan. So I'm going to click load, and it'll do all of the performance information from the flight plan and load it into the FMC. So as we mentioned earlier, reserves fuel, you have to enter that in here. So I said I was going to take 5,000 pounds, so that's 5, and then I execute that, and it moves on with the calculations. I'm going to go to the N1 limit page, and now we're going to look at the outside air temperature. It is minus 1 degrees, which gives us a 98% on the thrust at 26K, and we're going to leave it at that for this particular flight. So now we move on to the takeoff page. We're going to do 5 degrees of flaps. Our center of gravity is 20, which drives a trim value of 5.25, which we need to set in our trim, so we'll do that. And I'm just using a switch that's actually on the yoke that, like similar to the real aircraft, allows you to adjust the trim right from the yoke, which is very handy for when you're manually flying the aircraft. So 5.25 is set. Now I'm going to switch over to the EFB and actually load our flight plan into the EFB. So we'll do the loading of cargo, fuel, and passengers. So I go to the second page on airside services, load operational flight plan, and then activate. And it will start the fueling and the cargo loading, and also then the passengers.
Ground flight deck hose is connected and starting refueling.
So now while the fuel's being loaded and sounds like the cabin's being cleaned, so while that's happening we can continue on with our setup of the overhead panel. You'll notice that the cockpit door lights on the overhead panel, both the forward entry, forward service, forward cargo, aft cargo, and the aft service doors are open at the moment, so that's kind of neat. It actually shows on the overhead panel when those doors are open. So we're going to continue on with our flow now. So first of all, we're going to put the yaw damper on. We're also going to put the fuel pumps on. We're going to put the cabin utility IFE passenger seat power on. We have our exit lights are already armed, and we're still refueling, so we'll leave the passenger seat belts off. Oh, it's now finished, so we'll put the fuel, we'll put the passenger fasten seatbelt signs on. So from there, then we'll turn on the window heat. I'll turn on trim air, put the recirculation fans on, the left and right packs to auto, isolation valve to open, the engine bleed switches to on, and we'll leave the APU bleed off until we actually start the APU. Okay, so now down on the main instrument panel, we're going to set the auto brakes to RTO, and then we're going to reset the fuel flow so that it starts at 0. And now we're going to start APU. So let's do a switch in the middle of the overhead panel. We hold it for a second and it will start to start. APU is an engine that sits in the back of the plane. And now we've got positive indication on the dial here. They're showing that we have exhaust gas temperature out of the back of the engine. So it'll rise and then settle down at about 400, and then we can put the APU onto the bus. Okay, the APU is available, so we'll put it on the bus, left and right hand side, and we'll put the APU bleed on, which we'll need for when we start the engines. So here you can see Navigraph charts are geolocated, so the position of the simulator on the airfield is showing in the triangle you see in the middle, the magenta triangle in the middle. So we're actually going to be taking off from 17 left today, which means we're going to be taxiing probably on a hotel to Juliet, and then Juliet through to Delta, all the way through to 17 left. So you'll notice that 17 left has a degrees of 165 for the runway, actual runway heading. So we're going to put that actually into our FMC, into our MCP, and make sure that that's set up properly. So we'll now make that 165. We're going to change our heading to 165 and our course to 165. We're going to turn the flight directors on, so master on the captain side, and on the right hand side we have the flight director on for the first officer. So the master indication is right on the MCP there, so we're the prime. So now we're going to finish programming the FMC. We've got our V speeds that are there at 141, so we'll put 141 on our indicated airspeed on the MCP. And also now what we're able to do is upload the cruise winds in the FMC based on the flight plan. So we're going to go back to, we'll do that in a minute. We're just going to choose our landing airport on the FMC. So we said we were based on the operational flight plan landing in 8 left. So we've selected that now. We're going to execute that. We're actually just going to check the flight plan on the legs page to see if we have any discontinuities, and you can see we have a discontinuity there leaving Calgary going to Botag, so I'm just going to fix that in the flight plan. So we go from 17 left to Botag, and then from there following the flight plan. Now the route data area is where you can load in the cruise winds, so we're requesting that from the flight plan. And we're going to load that and execute. And then the next thing we need to do is put in our forecast for the descent winds based on the flight plan as well. So we've requested that in the FMC, and we should be able to load that in a second. And execute. So now we're fully loaded in terms of the flight plan into the FMC, and we're about 50% loaded on the passengers right now. So setting up the altitudes, I've put the cruise altitude into the MCP, where you obviously would be dealing with air traffic control in the real world and get step climbs up to our cruising altitude, but we're just going to put it in there. For now, we've also got in our cabin pressurization panel flight level 360 as our cruising altitude, with the landing altitude of the Vancouver airport, which is about 100 feet. So I've got a 50 in the landing altitude. Okay, we're almost full in terms of passengers, so just give it a minute here. We should expect the doors to be closed. Here's the door.
Flight attendants prepare for departure, cross-check and all call, thank you.
All right, we've got everyone strapped in. Give us a ring if you need anything.
Okay, we're ready for pushback.
Ground to cockpit, please show me where you want to go.
So now we tell about a pushback where we want the aircraft to be pushed to.
Ground to cockpit, tow is driving up.
And we'll see the tow here in a sec.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
I'm going to turn a logo light on and a collision light on.
So connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
So release the parking brakes by pushing down on the pedals, rudder pedals.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
Okay, so now we turn our left and right packs off so that we have good power to the engines, and we've started our pushback, and he gave us permission to start the engine, so we'll do that. We're going to start engine number 2 first, put it to ground, and we watch our N2 number rising. We add fuel, and we have exhaust gas temperature coming up and N1 spinning up. And that was the engine start switch, automatically switching to off. So we look for stable engine, 246, looks we're good, so starting number 1. We add fuel. Exhaust gas temperature, and 1 starts to move. And 54% switches to off. 246. Engine number 1 started good. Now we'll wait for him to finish the pushback, and then we can get taxiing to 17 left. So this is the position we're being pushed back to in the airport. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll probably take Hotel to Juliet, Juliet along to Delta, and Delta will take us to 17 left.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
So we set the parking brake.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
So now we've got both engines started. We'll put them on the bus. We'll put on our probe heat. Turn our left and right packs to auto. Our isolation valve to auto. We're going to turn the APU bleed off because we're finished with that. We're going to put the engine start levers to continuous and turn the APU off. Now we also need to set our flaps to 5 degrees for takeoff.
So is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal will be on the left. We'll see you next time. Have a safe flight.
There goes the tug. Okay, so now we need to check our flight instruments, control column, and the rudder pedals. So left, right, forward, back. Good movement. Testing the rudder. Left, right. All good. Blank the lower display for flight, and we're good to taxi. Now, ordinarily we would be talking to air traffic control, and there is no air traffic control that I'm talking to at this point, so we'll be taxiing by ourselves to 17 left. Okay, so we tap the toe brakes, it releases the parking brake, and we will taxi to 17 left. Now controlling the aircraft on the ground using the tiller on the left hand side, which you can't see in the screen, but that's how real 737 pilots control the plane on the ground. So we'll take a bit of a left here onto hotel. Transponder onto alt. So we're coming up on Juliet. We're going to make a left turn. Juliet, and we're going to turn left onto Delta, which is the second turn here. So see the left runway, the taxiway signs on the left. We're on Juliet, and Bravo is the next one. So we went Delta, so that's the one after this. You can see on the taxiway markings, Bravo's we just crossed over. And now we're going to turn left here to go all the way up to the end to get us to the threshold of 17 left. Slow down a bit, taxiing a little fast. Okay, we're getting close to the threshold, so as I was taught when I was doing my 172 training, the instructor always used to say lights, camera, action. So we're going to put on our landing lights and put on our position strobe and turn our transponder to TARA. So want to arm the auto throttle and arm VNAV and LNAV. Traffic coming, we're good to go. Okay, here we go. We've got asymmetrical power, we're good. Toga. Forward pressure on the yoke.
Knots.
Nice pressure.
V1, rotate.
Rotate.
Positive rating.
Gear up.
$400.
That's the one.
$1,000.
Bow tag on our flight plan is off to the right hand side here, so we're going to make a right hand turn any second. See the mountains in the west coming into view now. Beautiful view. LNAV and VNAV are armed, and the Command A is on, so now we're on the autopilot. It looks like we're getting a bit of rain. We're heading into some cloud layers, so we'll put engine anti-ice on, wing anti-ice. Still at +4 temperature, so it's not greater than +10, so we're going to put the anti-ice on as we pass through the cloud layer. We're starting to break through the clouds now, so I'm going to turn the anti-ice off. Best seat in the house right here. As you can see on the map, we're just heading towards Botag now. We're about 6.5 miles from Botag. And it shows us on our navigation display that we're now following the magenta line, which is the flight plan that's programmed into the flight management computer. Passing 18,000, we're now standard pressure for altitude. And you'll notice now in the FMC we're 66 nautical miles from top of climb, and that's around about the Binville waypoint is where top of climb is showing right in the navigation display. And you'll notice that there's this green, what they call banana, which is basically the VNAV calculating where we're going to reach a particular altitude that's set into the MCP. So we'll be at about 36,000, a little bit before the point where it's calculated our top of climb is. Okay, now our after takeoff checklist. We're going to turn all of our lights off, the engines start switches to off, to turn off the landing gear, turn our RTO to off, and check for, yep.
Well, folks, we're at initial cruise altitude now. It should be a relatively smooth flight. Seatbelt sign is off. Please only move around the cabin when that sign is off, and then anytime you're in your seat, I do request your seatbelt fastened about you regardless of the seatbelt sign. If you're not capable a little closer, meanwhile, please sit back, relax, enjoy the trip with us.
Okay, now we need to get set up for the landing. So we are going to go to the FMC and look at our approach reference page. So we have 30 degrees of flaps is 141 for the VREV speed. So what we're going to do is select that and put that in the flap speed. It also gives us the information for the ILS 408 left gives us the course and the frequency. So 110.55 is the frequency, so we're going to program that into the navigation radio. 10.55. So that's the ILS frequency for the instrument landing system for us to land at 08 left. And 08 left, it tells us, is a course of 083, so we're going to put 083 in the left course and the right course, so that we have those set up for the landing. And then we're also going to just adjust our heading here. We're flying on LNAV, but it's a good practice to keep your heading set in the MCP so you know what direction the computer is telling you to fly if they have a problem. The other thing we need to set is the minimums for landing. So we're going to look at the airport chart, and we want 08 left and 08 left. So we're going to look up the chart for 08 left in Vancouver, and the approach chart 08 left. We're going to pin that to our Navigraph screen, which brings up the chart for 08 left, and we confirm 083 110.55, confirmed that's programmed in, and then our minimums for a ILS DME or radar landing is 200 feet. So we're going to set that in our navigation, in the PFD, in the flight display. So we set that from the EFIS, and you'll see that the radio altimeter minimums is on the right hand side of the top right hand corner of the PFD. So we're going to change that to 200 so that it calls out our minimums. One of the passengers and their dogs are coming to the flight deck for a visit. Okay, the next thing we need to look at is the weather for Vancouver. So looking in Navigraph charts, we have the METAR from Vancouver. Its winds are 110 at 5 knots, visibility 15 statute miles, a few clouds at various different levels. The ceiling's 5,800 feet, temperature's 8, dew point is 1, altimeter is 3024. So now what we need to do is go to our PFD and put in that pressure for the altitude, so it's set for when we get to 18,000 feet on the way down. So 3024, and we can set that here using the EFIS again, 3024. So we have 4 things set. We have the reference speeds for flaps 30. We have our ILS programmed in, the frequency of 110.55, and the course is set to 083. We have our radio altimeter minimum set at 200 feet, and we have the pressure for the altitude 3024. You can see now on the FMC we have 98 nautical miles to top of descent, and in our setup you can see that I can adjust the distance. You can see our top of descent is in between the 80 and 100 miles away, so it actually shows right on the magenta line as you're flying. This is the approach we're going to be flying in, is the Canuck 5 arrival for 8 left and 8 right, and we start the arrival starting at the booth waypoint through Vitev, and then we start to get altitude restrictions all the way down to the north side of the airport, where we follow all the way down to 3,000 feet, and then in a normal circumstance you'd have air traffic control giving you directions and altitudes. We'll be down at 3,000 feet and expect vectors in for 8 left, which is a left-hand turn from Vinlo. We'll then join the ILS for 8 left using the ILS frequency that we've programmed in and the course of 083. Navigraph actually has a really neat feature. You can take the arrival charts and actually plot them against the map and your course. So you can overlay essentially any of the arrival procedures on top of the map, and it shows your position as that magenta triangle flying towards Booth. So we're 7.5 nautical miles from top of descent, so we're going to start to get the MCP set up for descent. So the next altitude that we would be given by air traffic control is around 21, flight level 210. So we're going to set the altitude to 210, and VNAV will actually fly us down from that altitude of 3,000. Flight level 360 down to flight level 210. So you'll notice now that the engines are retarding and we're starting our descent. You'll notice the auto throttle is motorized and it is now pulling back to idle. And in the flight display, you see retard in the top left-hand corner, indicating that the engines are retarding back to the appropriate level as per the flight computer.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again from the flight deck here, we're on our descent. Seatbelt signs going to be back up for our arrival. If you're up and about, please turn your seats to fasten your seatbelts. Still showing well ahead of schedule. Thanks again. Hope you have a nice week. Have you on here very shortly.
The seatbelt sign has been switched on. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelt.
So we've into our descent now, and you can see the green banana on the screen is showing us at what point we'll be at 21,000 flight level 210. Here's a little bit of a closer view. You can see that we're on our way to Booth and then to Vitav to be at flight level 210. Just the altitude down to 10,000, so we'll continue our descent. And lane, there's a restriction 10 to 14,000 feet, maximum 250, which is programmed into the flight computer, so we'll look to match that profile. We're now on the cloud, so I'll put the anti-ice back on. It is -6 out. Wing anti-ice on as well. And we'll just check our weather. In Vancouver, weather still 3003024. We're passing 18,000 standard setup. Turn our anti-ice back off. Back in the clouds, anti-ice on. Now we're turning right at Mills all the way to Vinlow, and then we'll be turning left onto final for 8 right. I think I said 8 right, I meant 8 left. Here's our picture of us joining on the chart. Again, it's geolocated on the chart, so we're following the approach path in the approach for 8 left, as you can see right here, and then the overlay for the ILS chart helps to show where we are in relation to the ILS and the airport. As you can see on our navigation display, the airport is just off to our left-hand side. On the south side, we're flying the arrival on the north side out over the water and then turning back in for 8 left. Okay, our altitude is now set to 3,000 feet, which is the altitude to capture the glide slope on the ILS, and essentially we need to be at 3,000 max 210 knots at Vinlow before we make the left turn. Okay, we'll put our landing lights on. When we turn off lights, engine start switches to continuous. We're going to do a auto brake 3 landing. Check, we have VREF for 30 degrees of flaps is 141. Our ILS is programmed in at 110.55 in the course of 083. We have 200 feet set in our minimums, and our altimeter is 3024, which is what the current weather is in Vancouver. So we're all set for the approach. A little bit of speed brake to slow us down. make the turn using LNAV.
Thousand to go. We're starting to capture the localizer. So I push the localizer button on the MCP as we slowly join the final approach course for 8 left. Flaps 5. Lousy weather today in Vancouver. Arm the approach. You'll see the glide slope indicator on the right hand side now. The glide slope is moving down the ILS, or the glide slope indicator. We're right on the ILS, and the localizer is centered, so you'll see the glide slope slowly start to come down towards the center, and then the autopilot will take over and follow it all the way down to the runway. Okay, we've got the indication of glide slope capture, a green GS on the PFD. So now we've started to descend on a glide slope. So now we'll configure for landing. So flaps 15. Gear down. And we have flaps 30. And indicator
indicated airspeed, we referenced 141, so that's set. And the aircraft is trimming in order to match the appropriate glide slope angle. Ready to descent. And we still can't see the airport. Looks like we're starting to come out of the cloud layer now. And anti-ice off. Speed brake armed. And I'll put auto land on just for fun. And we have land 3 indication, which means it's set up for auto land, and will automatically flare and do the rollout.
Thousand feet, stabilized, Mr. Perch, altitude set.
Approaching minimums. 200 minimum.
Continue.
100. 50. 30. 20. 10.
And reverse thrusters.
$80 knots.
Welcome to Vancouver.
Okay, so our gate here is gate 71. Okay. Brakes on, engine off.